So far TBRs are not quite working out for me, I guess. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today I am here to talk about the books that I actually ended up reading in January. So like at the end of December I had planned out perfectly what books that I was going to focus on. I had a book that started in January and figured that was a good time. Then I had a couple of series that I wanted to finish. I was very focused on trying to start this new year off fresh with getting through a couple of series that have been sitting on my shelves for a little bit. That did not happen. I don't know what is up with me this year because it's already a few days into February and I'm also having a lot of trouble focusing on the TBR that I've picked out for this month as well, so I'm not really sure what's up, but I'm just having a hard time really working off of what I've picked for the month. But I mean, I did do some reading. I have a stack right here, a little stack that I got through, but it wasn't what I was expecting. So first, out of the not planned reading books, we have Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. Or Rilke? I think it's Rilke. So I heard Rilke mentioned in a couple of other like booktube videos recently, so I figured, hey, maybe I should revisit his writing or this book, because this is the only thing I've ever read by him, I think, unless I may have read a couple of his poems once, but I figured let's give this another try. I read this in college. This was actually one of the textbooks for one of my writing classes. I can't remember which one, but yeah, this is one of the books that we were assigned to read and that we went over, and I believe we had a kind of assignment to write letters to either ourselves or letters to another young writer. This is basically, as it says, Letters to a Young Poet. This is a collection of letters that Rilke wrote to a young man who was currently attending this military academy, I believe, that Rilke himself had attended as well when he was younger. And we don't have the young man's copies of his letters or his responses or anything, but from the beginning part, the beginning part, there's an intro by the young poet. So he is explaining that he ended up reaching out to Rilke as an alma mater and as a poet, as he was also a young poet who was trying to, you know, deal with life and writing and everything, and he kind of reached out to Rilke for like advice and just kind of wanting to talk to him, and Rilke wrote back, and they actually exchanged several letters. I believe there's like 10 in here from Rilke. It addresses a lot of writing, but also how to deal with like different circumstances in life. So I remember back in college that I really connected with this book, because back then I had trouble not taking constructive criticism personally. Like I really took it personally, and it really like hurt me and upset me, especially when it had to do with my writing. So there's a lot that's said in here about not really listening to criticism and just kind of going your own way, and that was something that I really enjoyed back in college and took a lot of comfort in. I remember being really comforted by that. And there were even like a few lines that I had previously underlined or like notated on in here, but yeah, that was something that it really resonated with me at the time. Reading this probably like, I don't know, 12 years later, I had a different feeling about it, really. There's a lot that Rilke says in here about, like, focusing on solitude and really spending a lot of time alone working on your craft, which I know that as a creator, especially with, like, you know, whether it's like art or writing or anything like that, you do tend to spend a lot more time alone because you are thinking about your project or planning things for it or actually eventually working on it. So you do end up spending a lot of time by yourself and kind of figuring things out. But I feel like some of the advice in here that he had for this young poet, which again, we don't have his letters, but just from the way that Rilke was responding to some of, like, things that the young man had said in the letters, it sounded like the guy was kind of depressed and Rilke was just telling him to spend even more time alone and, like, ruminate on his depression and, like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's great advice, but this is also from like 1903 through 19 what is it 19 it's like from 1903 to 1908, so I don't know, I guess just manning up and being on your own and keeping quiet about, like, your feelings, like, that's okay, I don't know. So that kind of, like, bothered me a little bit, but then again, I don't think that I have the same kind of context reading this that I probably had when I was in college and we were actually, like, going over this and studying it, so I might be, like, missing something or misremembering something from, I don't know, the first time I read it. To be honest, I found this to be an incredibly melancholic work. I did not find it to be like the comfort that I remember this being when I was a young poet. So, I mean, there were a couple of, like, meaningful lines that I did, like, jot down from here, but for the most part, I just came away from this feeling more sad or confused than what I was hoping for when I picked this up, so that was a little disappointing, I guess. I did not rate this because it's extremely personal series of letters, so yeah, I ended up leaving it unrated. Another book that I ended up reading just because was Beauty and the Beast by Barbara Hambly. So this is a book that is based off of a 1980s television show. I don't think it ran for too long. I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 years or something like that. Basically, it follows, what's her name? Catherine. Catherine, who is a big corporate lawyer at her dad's firm, has the world on a string apparently, has a shitty ass boyfriend who's also rich and some kind of, like, real estate mogul or something like that. Mogul, pardon me. So yeah, life is good for her. She's bored, but, you know, life is good, apparently. And then on her way home from a party where the shitty-ass boyfriend misbehaves and she correctly leaves, although honestly, girl, you probably should have just dumped him because of how distasteful he acted, but that's the 80s, I don't understand. Anyway, she is actually kidnapped and beaten and left for dead in Central Park and is rescued by a mysterious man, and that is Vincent. They have no idea why he was born looking like this, but he was abandoned outside of St. Vincent's Hospital, hence the name Vincent, and he was taken in by the people who live in the sewers, or not even, like, it's like tunnels under New York City, so it's like the sewers and old abandoned subway stations and everything, and there's like tunnels throughout, and it's like basically all of the people who the overworld is basically really dangerous for. They have nowhere else to go, and they basically have made their own community underground. He takes her down there to help her heal, and they start having like a romance of sorts, basically, or they at least fall in love. And then when she's fully healed, he brings her back to the surface, and she ends up changing her outlook entirely, which is baffling to everyone who knew her originally. Her dad's confused and disappointed, but she has decided that she is going to work for the victims, and she joins a law, like the district attorney's office instead. But, you know, there's still ultimately a question of who were the guys that attacked her originally, who were they actually after, like, all this stuff. And star-crossed lovers, because how can they possibly be together? So I don't know if any of you have actually seen this show. I watched, like, one episode. I think I found it on YouTube or something a few years ago, several years ago actually, when I first read this, and it was cheesy. Reading it again this time, it struck me as even more cheesy. Like, it also, I feel like, has the worst parts of the 80s in here, whether it be like the fashion, and also what is apparently acceptable from men. Her, again, boyfriend disparages her, thinks that homeless people deserve everything that they get. He doesn't believe in poverty, he just believes in lazy people. And this is coming from a person who grew up poor and worked really hard to want for nothing, and he just is so nasty about people who have less than him, and it's like, this does not compute, really, but okay. He's also really nasty and rude about, like, her choices and her decisions, and it's like, I couldn't believe that it took her so long to dump this jerk. And meanwhile, like, the romance between them is kind of there, but there's like just weird, like, almost supernatural things happening on. There's also some really just, I don't know, not great points of views on sex workers, or, but I mean, it is from like the 80s, so that says a lot. Like, what were the 80s? It was the Reagan era, so everybody was like capitalist to the extreme, very materialistic. I mean, it's a lot like now, but there was a different tinge to it at the time, and everyone, like, looked like they were supposed to be on freaking Wall Street or something. Yeah, I will say that it wasn't really a good reread for me. I found it to be incredibly overly dramatic, very 80s. Honestly, the best parts of this book were when the underground world was being described, and the people who lived there. Although some of the people seem very stereotypical, which, again, 80s. So I will say that this just wasn't really that enjoyable of an experience. Like, I enjoyed Vincent because I thought he was an interesting character. I did not really know what to think about Catherine. She kind of bothered me, and overall I found a lot of the viewpoints and things in here to be pretty just unlikable. A lot of the characters in here I actually found to be very unlikable. And yeah, like I said, the best part about the book was the underground world. Like, I just didn't enjoy it that much. I did end up giving it 3 stars just because I thought maybe I am being just a little too harsh on this, because it is like a novelization of a incredibly cheesy television show, but I don't know. Oh, and if you're interested, the more recent Beauty and the Beast, like, TV show is a reboot of this, but it's a lot better. So one of the other books that was kind of unplanned that I read that is actually along the similar lines almost, in a sense, a lawyer, a big corporate lawyer that has something terrible happen to them, and then that changes their entire outlook and they end up working for, like, the people instead, and that is The Street Lawyer by John Grisham. I actually picked this up, like, right after I finished reading Beauty and the Beast, just because I was looking for more of the same. This, like I said, it's about a big corporate lawyer. His name is Michael. He is in this giant law firm in DC, and one day he and 8 other lawyers are held hostage for a while by a homeless man who comes in with a gun and with a bomb strapped to him. At the end of several hours, the man is dead, and Michael is, like, covered in his blood, and his life has been, like, irrevocably changed. So he went through a very, like, traumatic experience, obviously, and this is, like, ultimately a story about kind of redemption, or like a waking up from, I guess, the status quo. Michael is, like, a successful lawyer, but things aren't perfect on the surface. I mean, he is very selfish and kind of self-centered and really focused on making the big money. His marriage is in shambles, and he's married to his work, basically, and it's just really boring, like, antitrust stuff. The thing is, the thing that really, I think, pulled me in initially was the fact that right after this, like, everything had happened, everyone just kind of went back to normal. They're a little shook, but they just go back to normal, and everything is the same at the office. Everything has been replaced, cleaned up, and no one seems to really care about the man who took them hostage or what drove him to do it at all. And that doesn't exactly sit right with Michael, because it feels like, well, a man has been killed right in front of him and nobody bothered to ask why. They just figure he's crap and it doesn't matter because, well, at least everyone else is safe. I like that he questioned it, and I like that he had more feelings. Like, this event really shook the hell out of him. I was not expecting this book to move as quickly as it really did. I figured, you know, there might be some kind of time jump, because I knew from the back that he can't hack it after this event because he's in shock and this traumatic thing has happened, and he's the only one who cares about why this guy did this, and he wants to try to kind of absolve himself of the sins of his past of not caring by actually helping people and maybe preventing this kind of thing from happening again. Like, he wants to get right to helping the homeless and the less fortunate through his skills as a lawyer. So I knew that that's, like, something that he does, but I just kind of assumed that there would be a time jump, because that's usually what happens oftentimes in, like, movies or books. You know, this crazy thing happens and then maybe it jumps ahead. Like this book, it got the start, it jumped ahead, and a whole bunch of things happened. This did not do this. This was like a play-by-play of every emotion that he went through and his, like, decision making after this event. Like, everything that he did after that point. which I actually kind of liked because, like I said, normally there is some kind of time jump and whatever happening, and this just didn't do that. I also, though, felt sometimes that things moved a little too quickly, or maybe Michael moved on a little too quickly emotionally from point A to point B, but again, he's like dealing with a lot. He's in shock, he's had something traumatic happen, and it's basically freaked him out to the level of questioning everything that he's ever known and cared about, like his marriage, his, like, the way his parents raised him and his brother to be very materialistic and conservative, and just, it's changed, like, everything, basically. And people do kind of out of the normal things sometimes after traumatic events, so it really makes sense that he would kind of have this total upheaval, especially considering he's basically in the, you know, getting a divorce at the same time of all of this. I thought the idea of him, like, realizing how messed up his world is and deciding to deal with his guilt by doing something about it, like, I thought that was a good idea. That's what had me borrowing this book from my dad, because I like the sound of that. But at times the execution of him dealing with his guilt by doing this felt a little iffy. He's still kind of prejudiced. Like, there's definitely actions he takes and little things that he does are definitely microaggressions at worst. Or like thoughts, because this is from Michael's point of view, so we're getting like his thought process and why he's doing things. So that's still throughout here, which was bothersome. But, however, I did like seeing his growth over the course of this book as he realized how he was being prejudiced and tried to actively, like, change that. Even when his internal, like, monologue was still having the thought come to his head, you couldn't tell from his actions otherwise, because he had realized that what he was doing was not great, and he's, like, slowly trying to change himself, which is progress. And I did like that was something he kind of figured out over the course of the novel. It wasn't like perfect, but this is a first person narrative, so I will say though, at times throughout here it did kind of reek a little bit of the white savior trope, but mostly he was just like one more pair of hands trying to help the totally beleaguered poverty law lawyers that he ends up going to work for. I really liked all of them working together, and also really liked the other characters that he met and worked with at the law clinic, whether they were his actual coworkers or the people that he helped. But I mean, if I were to note like problems about this book, it would be the times when the white savior trope reared its head, because they really kind of brought in that, hey, he is someone who can change things and everything like that, but at the same time, the logic behind having him be like this person who can help elevate their work a little more made sense, because he's like a total like WASP lawyer and grew up rich and stuff like that, and he knows how to deal with like higher up law bullshit, which is something that they needed because everyone else in the office is pretty diverse, and they just needed him basically to be an extra person to kind of really, you know, move things along or schmooze people or be like the face of it in a sense, so other people like him will actually agree to like give them money or help or things like that. So in that sense it kind of made sense when those things were brought up, but there were times that it kind of just felt a little bit too much like that trope. Some of the commentary about like crime and people, like I said, it was a little bothersome, but they were mostly for like context, and there was a slow kind of show of uh, him like having some amount of character growth over the course of the book, and it's like a thick book, so that happened. Michael, I mean, I wasn't 100% sure if I liked him or not, to be honest, throughout the whole book. He certainly made a lot of assumptions about what other characters were doing and thinking, which is something I wasn't particularly fond of, but I mean, because he worked so long in corporate law, I guess it does make sense that he would know what strategies that corporate lawyers would apply uh, during different situations, but it also felt like he was almost like omnipotent at times. It's like, can you really be 100% certain what the other guys are thinking, like, every second during this process, or what? Overall, I thought really that this book did at least a lot, at least to make readers more aware of homelessness, especially like the demographic that's most likely to read a John Grisham novel. Like I thought that it was doing a lot to at least raise a little bit more of awareness. It definitely packed a hell of an emotional gut. I got really emotional throughout several parts of this book. Sometimes it felt like different facts about homelessness were really just kind of being thrown really hard at the readers, but I honestly didn't really mind the info dump that much. Like, homelessness is a real issue. Like, I'm sure it's an issue elsewhere as well, but it's such an incredibly big issue in our country, and the homeless in general are really treated as like expendable garbage, and that attitude is incredibly despicable. They're people. They deserve respect, and they deserve a roof over their heads and food and healthcare and therapy and clothes, and it's just how we treat people like other human beings is just absolute shit here. So this book, like I said, it packed an emotional punch. It did, I think, what it was trying to do for the most part, and it definitely kept me riveted the entire time I was reading this. There were the other issues that I mentioned, though, which was why this ended up as a 3, but, you know, I think as a courtroom drama slash thriller, it wasn't a bad offering overall. So the next thing that I read that was unplanned, actually the last unplanned thing, was actually a reread of a series. This is Forbidden Dance by Hinako Ashihara. This is about a young girl named Aya. She is a ballerina, is all she's ever wanted to be, and she actually, she's still in high school, and several months ago she ended up having an accident on stage where she gets injured, and since then she has kind of lost her confidence in dancing and has quite a big case of stage fright. She thinks she's not going to be able to get over this, but then she sees this dance troupe and realizes that maybe she can dance again if she dances with this troupe, and more specifically with the leader of the troupe. The thing is that this is an all-male dance troupe, so it's going to take a lot of convincing to be able to get her to be a part of it. So I really liked this. Like, I am not a dancer in any sense. Like, I am very much someone who does not have a lot of rhythm. But what really had me reaching for this series as a teenager was like the little bit of a bad boy dancer. I mean, he's got ear piercings, he kind of has a bad attitude. He's a dancer. I don't know. I was all about it as a teenager. I kind of liked that, and I really liked how feisty the main character is, and she's very determined that she can do this, and as well as the guys. She can leap as high, she can have the same amount of like stamina for dancing as they do, and I liked that. Revisiting this now, I still liked that. I liked how feisty she was. I liked the interactions between the other members of the dance troupe and her. They're all like a fun group of guys, and I enjoyed some of the dramatic bits, although the amount of drama that's in here just seems really over the top now, and I know that that was something I liked back then. It's not something I'm like fully on board with now, especially some of the like stuff that happens with the main guy. I don't know, I'm just not really into that type of guy anymore, I guess, but just like a bad attitude. But for the most part, I still really enjoyed the story overall, and just the drawing of dance is just so stinking beautiful. Like, it's so well done. Like, I think it's just incredibly beautiful the way everything was drawn. It's very well done and very detailed, and I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. So overall, I ended up giving this entire series like 4s all across the board. And the last thing that I read was actually the only thing that I had planned for January, and that was Successful Calamity by Edmund Fuller. So I said in my TBR, but this is the true tale of a writer's follies on a Vermont farm. Edmund Fuller and his family back in 1948 had a yearning for a simpler life. They lived in New York City, or just outside of New York City basically, and he was there all the time for work, and after having like some health issues or something like that, they just decided maybe the best thing that they could do would be to find a quiet place somewhere, and they ended up buying a farm in Vermont, kind of sight unseen, because they visited it in January. So they could see what they got, and they got 264 acres of snow. And they also knew that they had several farm buildings, a brick house, an old, like, I think it's like a stockade or something was what it originally was, and also, you know, other, not a stockade, a block house, basically, as well as some other, like, farm buildings. The thing was is that it's pretty run down, it needed a lot of work, and they had no idea what in the hell they were getting into. And this is basically the tale of the 5 years that they inhabited this farm. So things that I really enjoyed about this. I really liked the way that Edmund Fuller can tell a story. It's very charming. It has this kind of wit and sense of humor to it, that there's like a very specific type of sense of humor this is, and it's usually only found in books that were written around this time. Like, it's talking about stuff that happened in the 1940s, but this was actually written in like 1966, I believe. And it's just like there's a certain way that things are expressed between like the 20s and like the 60s. There's a very specific sense of humor that is found in memoir sometimes. And I don't really know how to get more specific than that, but it's a very specific kind of wit, and that was what was in here, and I found that to be particularly charming. I enjoyed hearing about his family's experiences, even though his wife, I think, ultimately had the worst experience out of everyone, because she had a couple of health scares and, you know, not great times, but their kids, like, really enjoyed you know, living in the country, and I liked learning about his, like I said, his follies and things that he screwed up or learned from at his time of trying to be a farmer and not really being very successful at that. I really liked, there is a particular section in here, it's near the end, where he really talks about the people around him, the other Vermonters, and what a small town up there is like. And I really liked that chapter because I thought that he really captured small town life in a good way. I mean, it wasn't all praises. He definitely had a lot of criticisms as well, but you know, having grown up there, and although it was definitely not in the 40s and 50s, I grew up there in like the 90s and 2000s, so like the experience was different, but I liked that I could relate in some ways to both the praises and criticisms of small town Vermont life and the people that you encounter, for better or worse, there. I also really liked kind of looking at what farming and surviving up there was like in that time period. A couple of my favorite all-time books by Howard Frank Mosher are written taking place in like the 40s and 50s in rural Vermont, and I really enjoyed seeing similar kind of situations and tools and things that were talked about in those books actually coming up in here. I really liked that, and it just made me happy that Howard Frank Mosher had done so much research, apparently, that he got all of these things like so right. I really enjoyed that. Things I didn't like so much. I wasn't a huge fan of a couple of the more intense farming details. I did not grow up on a farm, and I've never like raised my own food or done anything like that, so I suppose I'm like soft in a sense. But some of the aspects of farm life were not really pleasant to read about, such as the fate of some pigs, some family pigs, the fate of some cows, different poor cats. Oh my gosh, there was one cat death that really upset me, but so stuff like that I wasn't particularly on board with, especially some of the details about preparing like pig meat and stuff like that. I was pretty grossed out by, but overall I didn't mind it entirely. There were some like, not really like full bigotry, but just like a little bit of criticism regarding transplants from like Quebec and just living in Vermont, which I already know was a problem back in the day. Like people were pretty like bigoted back then about it too, so like that was in here, but it wasn't like trying to be nasty. It was more just like commenting on things. So like that section wasn't particularly a fan of either, but otherwise I did really enjoy this, and I found this to be an interesting book documenting life in rural Vermont for a bunch of city slickers who don't know what the hell they're doing when they try to farm on a farm that's very run down and needed a lot of work. But yeah, if you're interested in like the history of this area, or you just like reading people's strange memoirs, I would highly recommend it. I did have fairly good experience reading it overall, and I ultimately ended up giving this 4 stars. So that was it. That was everything that I read in January. Like I said, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I definitely read very different things than what I was planning, but overall it was a really good time. Mostly there were a couple of books I was kind of about, but not a bad start to the year. Also, in light of The Street Lawyer, I have found a couple of really great charities or organizations that their goal is to help homeless people and try to end homelessness in general, and I have added those now to the helpful links list down below, so those will be there from now on, those as well. Please do check them out. Anyway, I hope that you all had a wonderful January and are having a great February so far, and I will see you in the next video.